Hello, everyone. Welcome to the EdTech Society 34th Masterclass. My name is Briju Thangachan. I'm currently serving as the Executive Director of EdTech Society. It's a great honor to be with you this evening, and we have a great resource person as well. Before I introduce our resource person, I just want to briefly talk about EdTech Society. EdTech Society is a non-profit professional organization working in the field of educational technology. And so we have a flagship event, a conference, annual conference called Technology for Education. So this year, the conference is at IIT Madras in December first week. So I will share more details in the chat, and also you can look at T4E 2025. You will be able to learn more about EdTech Society and the conference coming up. And so we have different events. One of other events we do have is the PRISM. So please go to our etsociety.org website. And so those who are really interested in educational technology research, and so we do have a mentored program. So the teachers, faculty members, other instructional designers, those who don't have any experience in educational technology research, we are here to help you to do the research and share your experience with that as well. And so without further ado, I just want to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Sonali Dasgupta. So today's session is about designing for sustained STEM learning and competency. And so it's Dr. Sonali Dasgupta is the founder of STEMonsters Education, an innovation-driven organization transforming how children learn science and technology through interdisciplinary and experiential education. She holds a Ph.D. in Photonics Technologies from IIT Delhi and brings over 15 years of international corporate and academic research experience. I'm not going to take a lot of time to, describe. It's a long, brief bio. So, but it's an honor, Sonali, to accepting our invitation to be a resource person for this masterclass. We are looking forward to hear from you this evening. Please, the stage is yours. You can continue this session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Briju. I think when you give that gracious introduction, it sounds way more fascinating than I've ever felt about it. So thank you very much for that gracious introduction. I'll just share the screen in a bit before we get started, and then we can move on. So thank you so much for giving me this, inviting me to give this masterclass to the audiences of the EdTech Society. I very strongly believe that we need more organizations like this where there is a cross-pollination between experts of different fields, because ultimately that's where the society is moving, and there needs to be an interconnection between technology and the industry and the education societies. So thank you very much for that. And good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here doing this for the next 1 hour or so and talking about something that is more of a lived experience than something that it's more of a lived experience, honestly speaking, because I am not an education researcher. I don't have a PhD in education research, but I am a researcher who understands what education should lead to and how students should learn. And it is, when doing this, I'm always worried that people are not there, whether students will turn up for a class or a session, and considering that we are all here. So it's actually very nice. We are already off to a great start. And hopefully in the next 1 hour or so, I will leave you with questions to ponder on and some answers to move forward with. So with that, let's get started. The experiences that have shaped my journey to where I am today as the founder of an education venture started with me being a research scientist in the field of photonics technology, as Dr. Bridges said. So, from being a research scientist, working with the industries in interdisciplinary projects, I moved on to being a technology consultant, again across the globe. So, I was working with companies in Europe, in UK, US, Japan, multiple different companies. From there, I moved on to being an R&D product manager in a startup in Oxford, where again it was a completely new field for me. And I'll come back to why I'm describing what I've done in my journey and how that has shaped where we are and what I'm trying to achieve with these STEMonsters education in a while. So then I was the R&D product manager for a company which was working in molecular microscopes, biology, nothing to do with what I had studied earlier. And then now, in the last 5 years, I have been investing all my efforts into building a platform, the STEMonsters platform, for students where they can learn by exploration. They can learn through curiosity. They can learn how to learn, because ultimately that's where the world is going to, and we need students who can adapt and thrive in this world which is driven by technology. So, based on the multiple experiences, and in the last four, not just in the last 4 years, throughout my life, I realized that there are two big pieces in the puzzle when we are talking about students who can learn, who love to learn, and who continue to learn. And those two pieces are sustained curiosity and evolving competency. You put both of these together, and that is when you end up having a student who can be an innovator. Based on both of these, if we can continue to have these, while these are the two biggest pillars, these are also the two biggest problem areas that educators struggle with. How do I sustain them as students? How do I continue to upskill them and increase their competency levels as they grow up? So, when we can achieve both of these, we end up getting a child who can think innovatively. But innovation is just one side of the story. The other thing that also comes along with these two factors is learnability. And now that also brings me back to my journey that has shaped over in the last decade or so, where I moved across domains, sometimes working in gas sensing, sometimes working in molecular microscopes, sometimes working even with the European Space Agency for figuring out exoplanets using modal filters. Now, these were all very, very different areas, but I was able to adapt myself to the needs of that domain and give and find out a solution that was needed. Like when I was working for the startup in Oxford, I went to a new company. It was a startup, a corporate setup in Oxford, a city I'd never worked in. And they wanted to build something in a field which I had absolutely no idea of. And I had to pick up skills very quickly. I had to adapt to understand what they wanted. I had to understand their needs and then find the problem statement. And that is exactly what we also want our students to do. Because today it's AI, tomorrow God knows what it's going to be. So, how do we help them thrive there? The only way we can help them thrive in that environment is that they are able to learn quickly, adapt quickly, and then problem solve innovatively. But you don't have to take only my case for it. Let's not base the entire talk on my experiences. Today, with our work in the last 4 years, we have data of working with over almost 2,500 students. We have designed and we have seen the impact of the learning through more than 500 hands-on experiments, projects that the children have undertaken, all the way from grades 3 to grade 12. And of course, all of these observations of the students have been recorded both in the in-school environment and in the after-school environment. So there's a lot of data from various situations that I'm going to put across together. And we have seen one thing consistently is that we have somehow managed to sustain the curiosity of the children, and also help them remain engaged with what they are learning, hungry for more. So, how did we achieve this is going to be the story of today's talk in the next 1 hour or so. And although I understand it's a webinar, I would love for this entire talk to be engaging. So please do note down your question. Please put in question. Please challenge what I'm observing. All the good things that we teach our students, please practice those. And I would love to hear your feedback as well as questions. So let's move on. I said the two main things that we worked on when we started building the program was sustained curiosity and evolving competency. Now, everybody talks about curiosity. We all understand we say that we want the children to be curious. But when I started the program, I kind of realized that we could actually hold the curiosity of the students to a certain extent, but there were challenges. Students would lose curiosity after a few months. They would lose curiosity to learn when they were approaching middle school. They would lose curiosity when they were faced with something which was so-called difficult with them. So we made a bunch of interventions. We tried a bunch of interventions at different stages in different ways. And then we mapped it to what that intervention was to the theory of curiosity that is out there. And this is going to explain how we tackle the problem of sustaining that curiosity in a grade 3 child, all the way up to a high school student or a grade 12 student. So curiosity, I have a question. I'll probably give about 10 seconds. If there is anybody listening here, please put in your comments in the chat box. How many kinds of curiosity do you think are out there? Is there only one kind of curiosity or more kinds of curiosity? I'll give 10 seconds and then I will come back to this particular slide. So let's just see if somebody is there to give answers on that. If not, so let's just give that time and then I'll come back to giving the answer. Okay. I think that's a long enough time to give answers for the questions. So coming back to the theory of curiosity, actually there are many kinds of curiosity. There is, of course, the curiosity which is craving for novelty and variety. But an interesting theory that is there in curiosity is that as human beings, we always try to be comfort. The first discomfort is where we have understimulation. We are doing our daily chores, we are bored, and we want to get out of that. And we would do anything to come out of that understimulation. And that is a very quick craving for novelty and variety. That's the kind of curiosity where you would just scroll on Instagram. That's the kind of curiosity you would read a magazine and the headlines, and that's interesting. Okay, let me read a little bit more. But that's surface level curiosity, which has its own pros and cons. At the same time, the other end of the spectrum is the overstimulation, where there's a lot of things that we need to do, but then we try to focus on one part of the curiosity where we are trying to solve for one specific problem. And the specific curiosity is actually something which we want to cultivate in our children. Definitely, there is this risk of children getting bored because they are trying to solve the same problem again and again. And at that time, we would want to come back and give them a little bit of diversive curiosity to keep them working. But with this theory of curiosity, diversive curiosity and specific curiosity, there was a piece of the puzzle that was still missing. Why do people go to museums? How do I get a child to think about something completely different in their daily life? And then came the understanding of curiosity that evolved, which was formulated as the information gap theory. Now, our minds in general, again, as humans, we want to have information. Not having information is something that we're not very comfortable with. So when we have a gap in the information and what we are experiencing, we want to fill in that gap. And in order to do that, we could do it in a in terms of a sensory stimuli. So that is termed as your perceptual curiosity. So for example, you're taking a walk in the garden and you see a beautiful flower. You would walk up to the flower and you would look at it for some time, and it gives you a joyous emotion. You look at the petal shapes. You may even try to see if there is smell in that flower, the name of the flower. But there is another kind of curiosity that goes way beyond. After the initial perceptual curiosity, you can also take that to a next level, which is the epistemic curiosity, where now you do use Google Lens maybe to figure out what's the name of the flower, where does it originate from, what species does it belong to, and you start going deeper and deeper into the epistemic curiosity. So essentially, there are these four quadrants of curiosity that are there, which cover all kinds of curiosity that we think of. There is also a social curiosity where we learn from people's behavior around us in a group work setup, which we have also implemented, but I'll not cover that today for the paucity of time. But that is also something we can talk about maybe at a later stage. So, in these four quadrants, we have the diversive curiosity and this yellow quadrant, and we have the ultimate quadrant of the epistemic curiosity in the bottom right hand corner. And in most cases, in the educational setup, we would want our students to be somewhere over here. But to get the students to this quadrant, we need to be able to move along all the four quadrants based on where the student is in terms of their emotions, in terms of their knowledge, and in terms of their preparedness to take more challenging tasks. So, how does this really look in the classrooms? How does curiosity look in the classroom? So, for example, if I want my student to have diversive curiosity, I want them to quickly figure out something, just get them interested. This specifically works when you're trying to initiate interest in students in, let's say, a new topic, or when they are kind of bored with something and you want to still retain the curiosity. So you could have games, quick quizzes in the classroom. So it's a surface level knowledge, but they're still asking about something. Then, if I want them to go deeper, then and have the specific curiosity, I would give them problem-based scenarios. So let's say they're working with friction. We are talking the topic of friction, and we have done the diversive curiosity. They now want to understand a little bit more. Then we come to this hands-on project-based scenarios where I would ask them to figure out a certain problem statement. So they are now going specifically trying to figure out the solution to a certain problem, and that is now working on engaging and increasing their curiosity. Perceptual curiosity is specifically when I would like them to experience experiments, do something with their hands, and get that joyous emotion of having accomplished something. And finally, of our children to be, not necessarily want them to be, but work towards it, is when after they have a certain level of knowledge, I want them to have discussions amongst their peers. I want them to work on research projects. And that's how we build the epistemic curiosity. Once we have been able to move them across all these four quadrants, and ultimately they have gathered the knowledge through the various interventions to be at a stage where they now slowly have cultivated the epistemic curiosity in any topic that they are picking up or exploring. So in our classrooms, what we do, because this class is about how do we do that in classrooms, right? So I'm going to spend some time on how did we achieve this. So as I said, in our lesson plans or in our curriculum that we have, for every lesson that we have quizzes, peer review, even some fascinating YouTube videos that we use to get the children into the diversive curiosity quadrant when we feel they're losing focus. And that just brings them back, eases the cognitive overload, lets them relax a little bit, and then we have their attention again. In order to move them to the specific curiosity, as I said, we give them hands-on challenges. We want them to work with projects where they have to solve a certain problem, and that makes them go deeper into that specific information that they need to solve that problem. Then, if I want them to move towards the left quadrant, which is the knowledge exploration, we have incorporated sessions for the students where they pick up a topic and they do their own research into it. They explore the research. They still don't have the mastery on the topic, but they have the curiosity to find out more about the topic. And then they give their presentations to the rest of their peers. There is peer review that happens, and that brings them on this side of knowledge exploration where they want to know more. And finally, once they have moved across all of these quadrants, we have the scientific research where students pick up in order to build on their epistemic curiosity. We have long-term student research projects where they go through the entire process of mind mapping, prototyping, figuring out the failure points, and moving along and staying with the problem in order to build that curiosity and retain that curiosity with them throughout the entire project. So that's the curiosity in classrooms on what we have done. But how do you start a curiosity? You can keep talking about this word, but how do we actually implement it in the classrooms? So one of the things is, this is a very nice paper. I would recommend everyone to have a look at it. It's by Thieben in 2011, and he actually very nicely categorized 5 ways in which we can fuel curiosity or spark curiosity in the classroom. So it could be something that is novel, something new, something exciting. It could be a conflict. Many a times what we do is we just say, this is what you expect, but this is not what's happening. And that ignites the curiosity. We can start with partial exposure. So we give a bit of knowledge depending on where we are in the class, and we say, okay, we know this. What do you think is happening for this outcome to be happening? How do I get to this outcome? So you give partial exposure, and then you wait for the curiosity of the child to complete the entire information system. Then you can have complexity. So you say, oh, that's ambiguous. This is true. This is also true. How do you think both are true? And that again ignites curiosity for the students to go back and fill in that information gap as to how could it be ambiguous. So you're again igniting curiosity with that. And the last one, which is one of my favorites, is the uncertainty, is make them doubt the answers, make them predict something, and then experiment. So when they make these predictions, when they are looking at doing when they make the predictions, or when they're hypothesizing, they make a hypothesis before doing a hands-on experiment, and then the outcome comes in, whether it matches their prediction or it is clashing with what hypothesis they made. Both of them push them to think again, because now there's uncertainty and nobody likes uncertainty. So they want to figure out they want to move towards the certainty. And that is again another beautiful way to actually ignite curiosity in the classroom. So anybody who is listening to this talk and is planning on igniting this in a structured way, I would say I have at least 2 of these in every classroom, because depending on the vibe of the classroom, on the emotions of the students, you may need to use more than one spark to keep that curiosity going. So yeah, so that's about the curiosity part. Now I'll move the competency of a child, because only when curiosity and competency come together do we have a child who is well rounded, well grounded, and also competent enough to work on that curiosity. So, of course, everybody, I'm assuming, is an education researcher here. So, we are all aware of the learning S curve, right? Where initially there is a phase of slow learning, and slowly the child picks up on that new skill level, and then they have proficiency. But there comes a time when they hit a plateau, and I will talk about what interventions are required to come over that plateau. And then they come to a stage where their peak efficiency increases to the overlearning phase. So for those of you who may not have the background on the learning S-curve, what it means is when you give a new skill, when you start teaching a new skill to a student or a learner, how much time do they need to spend to reach a certain level of performance or proficiency in that skill? So the first one is the slow learning phase where you're just starting to learn. So curiosity plays a very, very important role in this first phase of the learning curve. However, the most difficult phase that the children find actually is at the plateau of the S curve, because that's where most children kind of give up, they get frustrated. So let's look into how we have been able to overcome the plateau in almost all of our students that we have worked with. But before that, I want to put this out. When we are talking of competency, there are basically, again, two wheels of the cog that we focus our entire curriculum and program on. And this is, in fact, one of the papers that we'll be presenting at the T4E conference in IIT Chennai next month, as Dr. Briju was mentioning. So if any of you happen to be there, I would be happy to have a conversation with you. So the two main pillars that we work on is constructivism, where the learners are actually constructing their own knowledge and understanding through hands-on experiences. It's not a lecture, it is giving just enough information so that they can work on their own and figure it out. But constructivism alone doesn't work. At least in my experience, we have not found it to work very effectively. So what we have done is we have used constructivism in addition and supported by scaffolded learning. So scaffolding is when you give some information to the child, some support to the child for a temporary amount of time, some time, and then you slowly withdraw that support. So it is literally like what is used in buildings and construction, right? So you take out that support slowly and make the child competent enough to move on to the next level of learning by themselves. So combined with scaffolding, we have seen an extremely good outcome of the learning competency from the students when constructivism and scaffolding are put together. So when we are talking about this, this is also that part where I said it is difficult for the students to get over the plateau. Once they have learned a new skill, they are moving to the next skill. But in that entire learning curve, after the initial phases, they hit a plateau where they are staying, but they are not able to increase their skill level. They are not able to increase their competency. And this is a very, very interesting paper. I would highly recommend everybody reading it. This is actually a book which kind of comprises 1970s research by Vygotsky on the zone of development. And what Vygotsky said was there are three zones of learning for any learner. The zone of actual development, where I'm comfortable doing what I do, I know what needs to be done, and I don't need help to do that. But that actually leads to boredom. I'm not learning anything new. I'm doing it, yeah, but now what? Nothing else. Then on the other extreme, there is a zone of distal development where I don't have the skills to learn. I don't have the skills to do what is needed of me, or I don't have the skills to master the topic that I want to learn. And somewhere in between these two extremes is the zone of proximal development, where with a little support, the child or the learner can move on to the next level of learning. And we want our students to be learning at this zone. We want them to be learning at the ZPD so that we can give them the correct scaffold to move on to the next level of learning skills. So what we did was, one is when we have to overcome the plateau, we have to monitor the child's learning journey to understand at which level of the learning curve they are. And we try to bring everybody to a level where they are at the plateau. They are maybe just going to touch the plateau. In the initial phases, of course, you are supporting them to reach the plateau. But once they reach the plateau, how do we help them overcome it? Once they reach the plateau, it becomes extremely critical to that the scaffolded learning comes into play. where we know what kind of scaffold we want to give them. And at that point, we bring in also the whole pedagogy of design thinking and also additional components like reflection worksheets, hands on experimentation to help them overcome the plateau of frustration. So at that point, we help them, okay, let's step back. How does it look in a classroom? So at that point, we help the student think about what didn't work for them. We sit down with them and we show them what can be done at that point. We stay with them both emotionally and also in the learning stage. So, what happens then is the child develops a self awareness of their own thinking, and they then start to evaluate themselves. They start to understand where they need to improve or can improve upon. Right? So, that's the stage where internalization and the self awareness, which is a very important part of metacognition, starts to come in. Of course, we can talk about this in lot of detail, but this is the main idea that at the zone of proximal development, we need to intervene with scaffold, with empathy to help the child not only in terms of academic or learning style, but also this whole socio-cultural influences that affect the learning journey and learning experience of the student. Right? So that's what we do at that point. So now once both sustained curiosity and framework and the program is designed with these things in mind, how do we adopt it in the classroom? That's the last bit of the puzzle that we are talking about today. So in our case, I will briefly explain this because we are giving a full paper on this at T4E. So what we have in our, it can be implemented in multiple ways. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we have implemented it, right? So what we have is we have a learning management system, of course, with the entire curriculum. But over there, specifically, we have two platforms, the teacher-facing platform and the student-facing platform. Now, the teacher facing platform is something where we capture the entire conversation that happens between the teachers and the students. And from that, AI is a boon in certain cases. We use AI to extract things that are important to understand the questions where they were struggling, topics which they find difficult, who said what at what point in time, to again assess where the student is and where the lesson plan needs iteration in order to map back and adopt to the learning speed and pace of the students in the classroom. On the other end, we have the student facing platform. Here, the students are actually entering their emotional state. They are entering their own self evaluation on their academic skills, on their learning skills. And that again is fed back, that entire information is collated, structured, and fed back to the teacher facing platform. And combined with what actually happened in the classroom and what the students felt about the class or the session, we have the adaptive lesson plans which adapt to what is happening in real life, in the real world, and then make those changes and then go back for the next session. So we build upon the curriculum based on what is actually happening in the classroom. So that's the basic overview of how we have implemented it, whether in schools or whether in the after school programs. And that brings me to the very last leg of the conversation today, which is having done all of this, what have we observed? What have we seen? So there were two main things that we have observed. One is the engagement of students in the out of school scenario where it is optional, where it is not tied to exams. And in those cases, what we have observed is while for a 1 year retention in similar kind of online after school programs, we have a retention of about 62-63%, which is kind of the average that is observed in literature. If you do a literature survey, you will realize that it's kind of the norm. But what is incredible is we have managed to get 45% retention over 3 years of a program of this sort. Again, if you do literature survey, you would see this number stands at around 18-20%. And the reason why we have been able to get this huge number is again because of the interventions that are mapped to the students' emotional well being and their learning stage, and also trying to keep them curious through the various interventions at the stage of their um, at that stage of their learning where they are. Now, similarly, the same program, when we have integrated it into a curriculum at school through grades 3 to 12, what we have observed is again the students' intent to continue this program was as high as 85% plus after 2 years. Even after 2 years, where it is in a school integrated fashion in a school classroom, students have wanted to continue with the program. They have their experience of the program has been highly positive. And what is not shown in the graph here is that we found about 70% of the students saying that they felt they can do something if they want to do it. And that is huge, because when students start thinking they can, when that confidence starts building, that's when you know that you can work with them further and you can push them for a challenge. You can help them overcome a frustration, in any project or in their learning curve. So, this is almost like the full circle moment of sustained curiosity and evolving competency, because when parents or teachers come back and they use words like scientific concepts, understands real life thing, kindling the curiosity, when all of these come together from parents who are not experts, who do not understand what has gone behind the program, but then are using the same keywords that we wanted the outcome to be, moment for any educator. And so that's where we are now. Of course, there are challenges, but for me, challenges means possibilities ahead. We need to still figure out how do we implement all of this in a situation where the learning diversity is really, really high. Right now, we have been fortunate to work in schools where students still kind of the variance in their learning diversity is not very high. But what happens when that is the case? How do we tackle disengagement when the child is not joining us from the initial stages where we have kind of built that muscle, but they join in, let's say, grade 7, grade 8? How do we inculcate and get them to the same level of curiosity as the others? And of course, the teacher training that we have been doing with schools, it takes significant amount of time to build the mindset, and we need to figure out how can we do it better and faster, because ultimately teachers are the one who are going to make this a reality. They are the ones who are going to implement it. So yeah, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child, and I think I am extremely glad that I'm able to talk about all of this today in a village where everybody cares about where and how we are nurturing the children. So I would love to connect with any of you who sees this as a challenge, who sees this as an opportunity, and who sees the possibility of a collaboration where we can take this to more and more students and make greater impact. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Sonali. The insightful presentation. I think there is one comment. Let me show that one. One question was from, yeah, can you see the question? If you can answer that one, that would be great.
Absolutely. I mean, we have been in talks with a few other universities as well, because especially for the grad level students, the first year graduate students, I think the school systems still are very far, they're pretty far away in terms of building that scientific temperament and the understanding in an interdisciplinary fashion. So, absolutely possible to create a program to do a similar platform for the university first year level students, at least. Once we get them in that mindset, then the higher levels obviously become a lot easier. But yes, short answer, yes.
It's just a comment, I feel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I absolutely love his theory of zone of proximal development and how scaffolding in that development can take the students to a completely different level. It's transformational, it's transformative, and I don't know why it is not implemented more, because it can be with a little bit of effort, I guess, and planning.
Great. So, is there any other participants? If you want, if you have any questions, you can post in the comments. So, the relevant questions we will post here. And so, while we wait for the other comments, so I just have a uh, uh, question, maybe a practically implementation question, probably. Um, uh, so you talked about the emotional connection with the
Yes,
student. So could you
yes.
explain a little more? How do you
So,
really connect
yeah.
with that?
So that's actually one of the things we'll be presenting at T4E conference as well. So this work is in conjunction with another school called Sparkling Minds Global School, where we have been working with them for the entire last 3 years now for their entire school. And we have a platform there where at the end of every session, the children actually go and enter their feelings. Think of it like a Google form. It's not as simple, I'm just simplifying it, but think of it like that there are pertinent questions where they enter how are they feeling. So they have, whether are you frustrated, are you feeling okay, do you want support. So they enter that into that platform. Then they write down their emotional stage, what are they looking forward to, or what was the frustration that happened today. So all of this is very carefully designed, but at the end of it, once you get that entire picture, it's like me telling you right now, this is how I feel. And that is now being captured in the digital way, which in the back end then maps it. And there is a color graded system where we can see it on a dashboard, which child is at what level of their learning stage and emotional well-being.
Interesting. So yeah, I think my son, they had in the fridge there is a like a they can sliding kind of things there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Am I frustrated today or happy like that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, so it just expand upon that and think of it like a digital space with much more nuances to it than simply how am I feeling. So it can tell you what topic a child is struggling, or it can tell you which topic they need support with. Then the teacher or the facilitator can intervene and have those interventions. So at the end of every class and before the next one, or let's say it's in a month, right, or in a week, we want to make sure that all the children are at the same emotional stage at that point. So then you intervene. But then the good thing is you're not waiting until the end of a couple of months when the exams come in and the report card comes into work with them. It is a continuously adapting system, so you're giving them what they need. And that brings me also to the fact that somehow I don't believe that we are at a stage where AI can actually replace the emotional socio-cultural learning that students need at this stage. It may work for learners who are adult learners, but for child learners, we still need that educator intervention to form the connection for them to learn. Because all of these learning systems, even the Socratic method of ChatGPT, assumes that the child is motivated. But what it cannot aim for, or doesn't realize, like we don't have that system yet, is how do you build that intrinsic motivation in the child in the first place. It works well if the child is motivated, they know what they're looking for, they know they want to find out, but how do you build that curiosity? So
Yeah.
that is the biggest gap in the complete AI systems that I feel we are at. Yes, it's helpful, but we are also using AI, right? So we are using AI to map all of this and understand where the child is and what's happening. However, I don't think we are still at a stage where we can say, oh, teachers not needed, they can learn through AI. I think, yeah.
Wonderful. So, what would be the class size, the number
This
of students usually?
this would be usually about 24 to
Oh,
25.
okay.
Yeah. So there are two formats, like as I mentioned in the class. So one is the after school format, which we work with. So now the implementation, the module, the curriculum is exactly the same. It doesn't matter whether we are doing it in a after school or in school. The only difference is in the after school, it's optional from the student side. In the in school, it is compulsory from the student side. So we needed it to be a little careful when we collected data that it was all anonymous. They were not told what it was about, to make it as fair as possible in terms of what they are saying. But yeah, so in the after school, which is completely online, we have about 10 to 12 per batch. And in the in school, it's a one section, right? So that's about 24. But yes,
Okay.
you need to have your systems in place, processes in place to work with the technology.
Okay, I think I don't see any other questions, but I maybe ask one more
Absolutely.
question, then maybe we can finish. So, do
Sure.
you focus more on the like this implementation, creating the curiosity in the cognitive level, or the more psychomotor, the topics,
So usually it is the cognitive level.
Okay.
So for example, as I was saying, there are different ways you can ignite the curiosity. So when we start, most of the times we would start with one of those five categories, right? So whether it's a YouTube video that is really, really interesting, and I don't know, it could even be Nobel laureates. Like this last month, we were talking about that. We showed the 1 minute explainer of the Nobel Prize that comes out from the Nobel Society. And then we said, what do you think? How do you think you have experienced this? Because they're all talking about this Nobel Prize. They think it's not achievable for them, right? But then once you start talking to them and say, this is how quantum computers are built, and this is what you see happening, the quantum tunneling effect that you see happening, explained with light, for example. They start to believe and make it relatable. And that sparks the curiosity, because you will not be curious about something you feel intimidated with. You will be curious about something you feel you can tackle.
Correct.
So the first stage is to get them to that diversive curiosity where it's superficial, and the risk is not to stay at that level. Then you have the intervention to move them around the four quadrants to bring them eventually to the fourth right side corner, epistemic curiosity level. But when you're starting with a difficult topic, that's how you ease it out. That's why I said you have to be flexible between the four quadrants.
Wonderful. Great. I think there is one more comment, then I show that one. It's just a comment. Thanks for the webinar. Okay, I think we don't see any other comments. And once again, Dr. Sonali, to share your thoughts on it was an insightful session today.
Thank you
And
very
those
much.
who are the participants, so we are looking forward to see you at the T4E conference or in the
Absolutely.
next masterclass in January. Once again, thank you for taking the time to join the session today. Thank
It
you.
was a pleasure. I really hope that it was helpful for the audiences who are listening in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.